Tony the Dusty Woodworker here. Today I'd like to discuss lap joints and miters and how to combine them. A lap joint is two pieces of wood of the same thickness with a flat end cut away to form a half lap joint. I've glued some scrap plywood pieces together to demonstrate what a lap joint is. A lap joint is just simply a piece of wood that has had some slats cut into it so that these two mating pieces can lay together and align. You get a high area of glue surface area. There's another joint we can talk about. It's called the bridal joint, where one piece has a tongue, a 1/4 inch tongue, and the other piece has a 1/4 inch groove. And as you can see, although these pieces are a little bit difficult to manipulate, this is a bridal joint. You have the tongue and groove that go together. Here's a piece already prepped and glued. You can see the end grain here, but you don't see any end grain there. And the mitered joint is nice and tight, nice and crisp on both sides. You have to pay attention to what you're doing to achieve this, but if you do pay attention, you can make a nice joint. Now here's the tongue. It's going to go in the groove. Here's another piece that has the groove in it. It's already been prepped. This piece is a little bit on the tight side, but as you can see, the end grain does appear at the end. So whenever you cut the length of your material, you probably want to go the saw curve thickness extra for the overall length. And then when you're done, you just simply remove that portion with a chisel, a plane, or sander or file, however you care. You get a nice finished edge. Here's a simple mitered joint with no extra strengthening on it whatsoever. It's fairly strong, but it's not so strong that I couldn't break it apart with a little bit of effort. Let's go to the table saw now and start with nice square edges on both ends of the pieces that we're going to be working with. This piece has already been partially prepped, but let's start by setting the saw blade to the same height of the thickness of the material which we're going to be working with. See, I'm just testing for the height of the blade. Now that the blade is the height I want, I can now put it on a jig and cut my 1/4 inch out of the middle. After adjusting the fence, I can now widen my groove ever so slightly. And you want to take this slow because you want to make sure you get it right. Now the reason why I'm going back and forth is because my saw blade has gone dull. And pardon me for the blurry film. I don't know why the camera went blurry. Cut through the piece all the way. And again, you see I've made some fence adjustments, and I'm making that wider just ever so slightly, each time flipping it over so that I'm doing the other side at the same time as well. So you can't really see, but that is just a slight bit over a 1/4 inch wide, and that's what I want. You see how well that fits into the tongue of the next piece. Now we want to cut and mill the tongue that's going to go into the groove. It is set. I'm using a piece that I've already test fitted on. I'm getting my blade height to the size that I want. First thing I'm going to do is make a base cut. Again, I apologize for the video. I have my base cut, flip the piece over, and make the other cheek base cut. I live next to the Air Force Base. Now, using the spinning saw, I'm going to just nibble away that surface just a little bit, as you can see here. And I'm going to keep inching just a little bit forward and nibbling a little bit more off, a little bit at a time. Here you get a better picture of what I was just describing. Each time I move a little bit further forward and take just a skim off. The reason why I do this is because my blade is a cross-cut blade. It's not a rip blade. It does not have flat top teeth. I've done one side. Now we'll do the same thing to the other side. And the tongue is there to stop me at the same point every time. So I won't have to be really careful. I'll just be able to mill this away until I have two flat surfaces. And the rough surfaces will actually give me a better gluing surface than if I were to sand it ultra smooth. So here's the completion of the tongue. Now I need to cut that miter on this piece. So raise the blade up and take my piece just to where I'm just touching the corner of my wood. And yes, my fingers are kind of close to getting nipped by the blade, so once I've got my fingers out of the way, I go very slowly, because if I go too fast, I can actually push the wood and get an uneven cut. So here's how those fit. They fit together really nice. It's a good fit. It's a pretty good corner too. So allow me to demonstrate here. Now you can see some burning from my saw. Now before I can put this together completely, I need to get those high grooves out. Using a 1/4 inch chisel, I'm able to get right down the middle of that and just knock those high edges off. It's good to work from the outside towards the middle. You don't want to work through from one side to the other, because you can actually push some material away. You get chip out. And nobody likes chip out. Here's that joint again with that half, well, too late. Let's take a closer look at it. You can see just a little bit of mismatch on this. So there's just a little bit more chisel work I need to do to get that to set down flush. Now I could set that down flush, or I could cut the tongue. In this case, I don't want to cut the tongue, I want to cut the groove to make it fit a little better. Looks like a pretty good joint. I still want to knock just a little bit more off, and here's what I was talking about. This is going to get some chip out. So you can see a little bit of chip out there underneath the corner, but it looks pretty darn good. Nice tight joint. And it's nice and square. Square, of course, depends on your jig, whether or not your jig is square. And I spent about an hour making that jig square. So as you can see, it's square all the way down, both sides. There's no play in this. This baby is nice. So now let's put a little bit of glue on this here. Spread the glue around, get a good coating on all surfaces. Make sure you use enough glue. Too much glue is better than not enough glue, because too much glue you can wash it away, and if you have to, you can sand some of it away. Get the cheeks and the face of the tongue, and you want to get glue on the inside of the groove as well. Make sure you get all surfaces coated, and don't waste too much time, because you want to make sure the glue goes together while it's still wet. And there you see I've got some squeeze out. Now, just to make sure this joint is nice and tight, I'm going to put a clamp on the piece this way, and I'm going to put a clamp on the piece the other way as well. Of course, you got to make sure you got the clamp in the right spot so you don't actually push the joint apart. Yeah, the Air Force natives are restless today. Now, let's let that dry. Before it's dry, though, we want to wash off some of that excess glue. One of our pilots, I like to call him Lover Boy, because he seems to like to come around and fly really low and loud. So this joint is looking pretty good. Now, I've taken the chisel and knocked it down. Let's take the sander now and just do a final cleanup on that joint. Looking good. Just hit the end just to make sure that the point of the other piece does not extend beyond the top. Get that sanded so that it's nice and flush. I didn't have to do much flush sanding because it was already quite close to being flush. And that's it. All done.